Hello there, and welcome to Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed. I'm your Rules Arbiter Steve, here to bring you the second video in our class dive series, where we go over all the different classes for the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system, and maybe when we run out of classes, we'll do other systems. But for right now, we're doing the Cleric from the Pathfinder Core rulebook, or the Remaster, some of you may know of it. We're going to be going over what the Cleric is, if you don't already know. What they can do, what kind of abilities that they have. Also, we're going to go over some changes that happened between the original 2nd edition and the new core update. So stay tuned as we go over what it means to be the scion of your god. And welcome back. And although many of you who are watching this video probably already know what a cleric is, and if you want to skip the section, I'll try to do that timestamp thingy again, so you can skip past the section. But just to go over some people who maybe have not played these fantasy type games before and don't know the idea of a cleric and just think, oh, this person who reads scriptures and sits in a building all day. We're going to go over what it means to be a fantasy cleric. So, like I said, for those of you who don't know, a cleric is actually, obviously, is a devout follower of a deity. But a lot of these fantasy type games, there are many different deities, and they have many different ideas of what is correct or right for their particular faith. And each one of these deities draws followers who are like-minded. You have the god of crops and feeding people, and then you have the god of complete and utter destruction and bad stuff, and you have everything in between. You even have the god of money, Abadar, I believe is the god's name. And Pathfinder has their own pantheons, multiple pantheons of different gods. Some of them are just very powerful creatures or beings that have basically become so powerful that they've become deities themselves. You have humans that have eventually turned into deities, either by completing the quest for the Starstone or through other means. And then you have other just powerful creatures that are gods. And these creatures are so powerful that they can kind of bestow power on us lowly mortal people. And obviously some of the people who follow these faiths very devoutly, like a cleric, may get some of this power granted to them and have these extra powers that they can do, basically espouse more of the cleric's teachings effectively. So think of it as if a champion / paladin is the tip of the sword of that god. Clerics are more of the voice of that god, and they're the ones who try to convert other people to their faith, who inform other people of their faith, and also seek out to destroy their faith's enemies. And in the context of fantasy games, this generally boils down to good and evil, kind of. Gray. There's always gray. But a lot of the tropes that you would think of as a cleric in these fantasy-style games, Pathfinder 1st and 2nd Edition, the Remaster, Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of those purely high fantasy systems, is that the cleric is a magic user, but they derive their power from their deity. And they are typically thought of as the foil to the wizard, where the wizard uses purely knowledge, logic, mathematics, just learned things to acquire their magic. The cleric uses purely faith in their chosen higher power to garner their powers. So a lot of times they are looked at as diametrically opposed sometimes. So as we go into the different abilities, so it's a quick and dirty, because and the thing about different clerics is you can have two different clerics standing side by side, have the ability to cast the same spells, and how you roleplay them is completely different because of the gods or deities that they might follow and how devoutly they want to espouse the teachings of their gods. Yet again, that's all up to your RP, your roleplay. But for a mechanical understanding of clerics, we're going to dive into what it means, what kind of abilities that the clerics get in the remastered version of the game, which didn't change too much from the original Pathfinder 2nd edition, but we're going to get into the changes a little bit later. So first and foremost, clerics cast spells. Like I said, they are equivocally powerful to wizards, meaning they get the same rank of spells. They get actually more hit points than a cleric, so they're a little bit tougher than a wizard, getting D8 hit points instead of D6 hit points, and their driving statistic a lot of times is wisdom. So a lot of their spell attacks, a lot of their spell attacks, their spell saves are all derived from wisdom. Their class skill being religion, which is all about the divine, and those divine and celestial entities, is driven by religion. Religion is driven by wisdom. So a lot of things that are about a cleric are driven by wisdom, and the cleric being as wise as the wizard is intelligent. With the divine spell list, you are going to find a lot more access to vitality, damage, and healing, and void damage and healing effects, more so than most other spell types. So you're not going to find almost any healing spells in like the arcane spell list, but you are going to find quite a few in the divine spell list, as well as a smattering of other things. Like, yet again, a lot of like holy light is a spell that we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and things that specifically target holy entities and things that target unholy entities. And that's important point that we're going to get to. The cleric also at first level has a couple of big decisions to make, and that literally drives how and what you want to do with your cleric forward. And the two major points is, who is your deity? And there's a bunch of stuff you get with your deity. You're going to get an extra skill. You're going to get and a bunch of ability choices that you're going to get really derived from your deity. And then you're going to pick your doctrine. Now, no matter what deity you pick, you're going to be able to pick a doctrine. And what this means is, are you going to be a cloistered cleric, focusing more on your spell casting and not as much on your martial prowess? Or are you going to be a war priest, sacrificing a little bit of that higher end magical power and a couple of spell choices, but you're going to be able to wear medium and heavy armor? You're going to get that proficiency along with that. You're going to be more proficient with your weapons, especially your deity's weapon. So that's a choice, whether you want to be tougher in combat and not have to waste feats on learning how to wear armor, or do you want to be that divine powerhouse and have a lot more access? Well, I would say not a lot more access to spells. Specifically, you will get focus spells along with being a cloister cleric, and then war priests do not get focus spells innately. They can pick them up later if they want. That's not to say that war priests can never get focus spells, and it's also not to say that cloister clerics can never wear armor. But it doesn't come along with their characters. So cloister cleric comes with something called a domain. Yet again, domain, you have to look back to your deity, and there's a selection. There's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 choices that each deity has, that they are kind of like obviously their domain of their power lies in these different areas. It could be death, force, fire, healing, soul. And you'll have a small list on your deity. Yet again, while your deity selection is extremely important to really realize what you want to do as your cleric. And the war priests don't get focus spells. They don't get a domain. There's a feat they can take to get it, but that costs them an extra class feat. Same thing, war priests get innate proficiency in their light and medium armor, and they do get the shield block feat. So they are more equipped to handle melee combat than a cloister cleric, because a cloister cleric only gets unarmored. You don't get any benefit from armor as a cloister cleric unless it's coming maybe from your spells. And then the war priest gets it. Yet again, it comes at that cost. The other major ability that all clerics get, no matter cloistered or war priests, is something called the divine font. Now, yet again, you have to look back at your deity, and it'll tell you what kind of one you get. There's two different choices you can, depending on your deity. You can either get the healing one or the harming one. And heal and harm are spells in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Heal obviously heals people, and harm harms people. Well, heal also heals living things and harms undead, and harm hurts living things and heals undead. So depending on which way you want to go, you want to be able to be summon undead and keep your little minions alive, maybe you're going to go the harm route. Generally, since most of your compatriots, unless you're playing an undead game, most of your compatriots are going to be living. If you want to pick the healing one, most of the gods that are in the book here and available in a lot of the other resources, there's quite a few choices that you can make to get the healing font from your, and some even offer a choice. You can do either one with the one choice of a deity, but once you make your choice, you're kind of set with it. And what the hell is a divine font? Well, the divine font is basically a bunch of free spell slots just for either the healing or the harming, whichever one you picked, whichever one the god forced you to pick. And these are extra spells that you get to cast throughout the day that don't charge your normal spell slots. And these spell slots are always treated at the highest level of the spell rank you can normally cast. So if you can only cast first level spells, your divine font is first level. If you level up and you live and you can cast 5th rank spells, your divine font casts 5th rank spells. It's pretty simple. And just like any other spell slot, these reform this pool of divine font spell slots gets refilled at the beginning of every day. So we're going to pull up somewhere on the left or right of me. We're going to pull up an entry of the god Aurori. And you're going to see a couple of things you're going to get when you pick a particular deity. A couple of things you're going to get is you're going to get a selection of spells added to your spell list, even though they're not divine spells. Because we talked about this, that the cleric casts off the divine spell list, but your deity gives you a little bit of access to their power, a little juice of their power, which may be beyond the divine spell list. And specifically Nethys, we're going to compare Aurori and Nethys a lot in this video. Nethys, you get a bunch of spells. And in Aurori, you only get, for the most part, you get 3 spells for most of the deities. Nethys is special because Nethys is the god of magic. And since most of her powers derive in the arcane spell list, you're going to get quite a few nice selections of spells from her. But you get those, you get the cleric spells, which are added to your spell list. You get the divine font. We talked about that before. Now, both of these selections say you can pick either heal or harm. They kind of ride the line. They could say, you can pick either one. We don't care. Some of the gods say, no, you can only pick harm, or no, you must pick healing. So some of the, be careful. I know I picked one that they both have heal and harm, but I like Aurori and Nethys, whatever. Both of these have something called divine sanctification. Put that in our pocket for a second. We're going to talk about that later. That's a whole new system for the Remaster or the Pathfinder Core. That is basically a replacement for alignment, which kind of got squashed in this edition. You get your divine skill, which is now a new skill training that you get proficiency in that skill. You get trained in that skill, but yet again, it may be different for every god. Those domains we talked about, remember, that's only for the Cloister Cleric or for War Priest if you pick the extra feat, and you'd have to burn up a class feat to get it. And then you get proficiency in the favored weapon of that god. Now, in the case of Aurori, it's the fist. You punch people. And then Nethys gets the staff. Both of these you're technically proficient with already, because the staff is a simple weapon, and the fist is everyone's unarmed, everyone's trained and unarmed. But some of these do give you access, like Gorham, you get the great sword. So there are times you pick a god because maybe they're going to give you a weapon that you normally are not proficient in. And if you're a war priest, you're going to get a little bit better proficiency in your weapon of choice for your god. So you might be a little bit better combatant as a War Priest Cleric, or you will be a better combatant with your weapons as a War Priest Cleric than you will be as a Cloister Cleric. So picking your god gives you a lot of different things that give you options, depending on which deity you pick. And each god also, as you see above that, you have edicts and anathemas. These are the do's and don'ts of your god. The edicts are things you should be doing, and the anathemas are things that you should never do. If you do the things that you are not supposed to do, you could potentially lose your power to cast magic until you say you're sorry by doing the atone ritual. That's a whole thing. But it basically gives you an idea. And also, if you read the little description, you'll understand the basis of the god. And the do's and don'ts really give you an idea of the tenets of that god, what they like seeing and what they're all about, and what they fight against, and what they expect you to espouse, what they expect you to do and fight against. So if you have an idea for your cleric, you might want to search around for a deity that really lines up with that. Or maybe you really wanted to be a cleric of a particular god, and you're gonna have to mold your character to fit that ideal. The other thing is, as if you watched our Bard video, we'll link that somewhere. We'll link that somewhere up here if you guys haven't seen it and you want to see information all about the Bard. I talked about how they cast spells in that video and talked about what is called spontaneous casting and spell repertoire. And you're going to notice a severe lacking of all of that for Cleric. Remember I said a lot of people compare the Cleric and the Wizard being diametrically opposed, but they cast magic in the same way mechanically. Meaning that at the beginning of the adventuring day, you get all your spell slots back, and if you have focus points, they all get refilled. And you have to then choose the beginning of the day what spells are going to what slots. So you have to kind of have an idea of what you're going to be facing, generally picking generally beneficial spells over situationally beneficial spells, unless you're pretty sure that situation is going to come up. But trust me when I say that when you have the perfect spell for the perfect opportunity, it does feel really good. But you will have to put your spells in your slots ahead of time and hope that you picked right. And the Divine Font ability, those spell slots always get filled with heals or harms depending on your choice. But your normal Cleric spell slots get filled at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, whichever your group sets. Whatever you do, your daily preparations. Whenever that happens, you set up your spells. Now, at first level, you only have 2 spell slots, I think, plus your cantrips. You get 5 cantrips that you have to set. So of all the cantrips you have access to, you can pick these 5 and okay, I want to run with these 5 today. And cantrips, unlike regular spells, you can just keep casting them and they heighten to half of your level, or basically to the highest level spell you normally can cast in your regular slots. So if you can cast 3rd level spells, your cantrips are casting at 3rd level. And then you have to fill in your spell slots. You have 2 spell slots. Like, oh, wait, am I going to take an extra heal with me? Maybe I'm going to take that Shield of Faith spell. But unlike wizards, who have to learn each spell that they know, but they can know all of them, given enough time and money, they can load up their spell books with every single spell that they can get their grubby little hands on. As a cleric, you basically just say, hey, God, can I have these spells? And you're doing your daily preparations, which including praying to your God and praying for your spells. You're saying, please, God, can I have the healing spell so my compatriots don't die this week? Because that barbarian likes to jump off cliffs and breaks his legs every time. But you're effectively praying or asking your God, hey, can I have this power? Can I have this spell or that spell? We don't actually, a lot of times groups don't role play it, but that's effectively what's happening. And then you load up your spell slots. So when you get higher level, you have quite a lot of spell slots to fill. If you're, a 10th level caster, you have all of those slots to fill. A 10th level cleric has 15 spell slots of various ranks to fill. It's 3 per rank, up to 5. Yeah, up to 5. And that's in addition, if they have focus spells, that's in addition to that too. And remember, you have all the divine spells as well as the ones that your god gives you access to. So you have quite a lot of choice. You basically have your entire spell list and you go, what do I need today? And you fill up your spell. So a head knowledge, look, a head knowledge helps everybody. If everyone knows what they're going to be facing, that's beneficial for everybody. But it's even more important for the classes, for the spellcasting classes that have to memorize their spells ahead of time. Because having the right spell for the right job is a nice feeling, but having that spell that you thought you'd needed and you're never going to cast, oh man, that bums me out so much. And like I said, if you did watch that Bard video and we talked about the spell heightening, that we get the signature spell, this class doesn't get that either, because no matter what spell slot you put a spell into, it just becomes that level of spell. So if it's a first level spell and you throw it into a 5th rank slot, it gains all the benefits it would normally have based on that little heightened bar on the bottom, if it has one. Most spells have some sort of heightened effect, and you just read the bottom of the spell. We're going to go over heal, and because it's a pretty ubiquitous spell for clerics, because most clerics are going to cast it at some point, but you're going to see that heightened effect. It's right there. You see it? So this heightened effect is +1. So a heal cast at first level just gets this upper benefit, and every spell slot or every spell rank above this number, which is the heal 1, that's a first level or a first rank spell, every number above that gets this +1 benefit. And for every time it's so if it's 2, we add this once, and 3, 4, 5, it just keeps getting better and better and better. But if a spell is already 2nd level, you can't throw it in a 1st level slot. That's the minimum slot that you have to use to cast that spell. Okay, now let's get into the changes, the major changes, and there weren't that many for Cleric. Now there may be, just to preface this, there may be a lot of spell changes, actual changes for the spells. And there's a lot of word changes because of the changing. There's kind of the whole reason that the core version of the rules was done was to, some of it was a lot of verbiage changing. And we're not going to go over the spell changes because there's way too many for us to go over in this video. And this video is really about the cleric, more about the cleric than their spells. So we're not going to go over individual spells. I might make reference to 1 or 2 as I talk about them, but this is more about the changes on the cleric. Now, the biggest sweeping change for the cleric is this whole idea of sanctification. And I referenced this before, and they said we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it right now. Prior, during the 2nd edition, the original 2nd edition of the game, gods had alignments. This god is lawful good, this god is chaotic evil, this god is neutral good, all that stuff. The 9-tiered, and I put a picture of the alignment chart meme over somewhere over here. But the idea is that there were 9 different types of alignments, and there were gods that fit every single one of these paradigms. They removed alignment out of Pathfinder. There is no more alignment anymore. So that kind of got partially replaced by 2 different systems. One is the one we already talked about, is the Edicts and Anathema, is the do's and don'ts of your gods. And then you have the idea of sanctification. And this is another indicator of whether your god is more leaning on the side of good or holy or unholy or bad. If you want to boil it down to good and evil, this is the way they kind of did it. And you're going to have a choice on sanctification. Well, you may have a choice. You may not also. A bunch of different, depending on the gods you're looking at, you might see different choices here for different gods when in terms of sanctification. You're going to see a may, a must, or none. Basically, it says if you must sanctify holy or you must sanctify unholy, you don't have a choice. You have to do it, or you pick a different god. And we're going to get to what sanctification is in a second, but the must is you have to do it. The god doesn't give you a choice on whether you sanctify to their ideal or not. And then some of the gods, like Aurora and Nephis, say you may sanctify holy or unholy. But once you make your choice, you made your choice. If you want to sanctify to the holy side, you're sanctified holy and there's nothing you can do about it. But if you choose not to sanctify, that's also the choice, because you may, which means you also have the choice to not do it. And there are a few guys that don't offer any sanctification options at all. If you look at Gazra, Gazra does not give you any sanctification option at all. It just says none. It says, nope, not even interested, don't care. So what the hell does sanctification mean? It effectively gives you that trait, whether it's holy or unholy. Now, just by getting the trait doesn't necessarily do anything. It does add that trait to your spells when you cast them, and some spells do have an effect, an additional effect, if your target is holy or unholy. And I'm going to show a picture of, I believe, the spell Holy Light. And it says if your target is unholy, they get a bunch of extra damage. And there may be entries in monsters saying it does unholy damage, which may only affect people who have the holy trait. So the idea of sanctifying, and whether you want to do it as a cleric or not, really comes down to the fact that a couple of things. One, you might want to take the risk of being able to do more against those unholy targets if you want to sanctify holy, or vice versa. If you want to sanctify unholy and fight those, maybe like those celestial targets may get affected by your spells a little bit more, and certain spells may be affected by a little bit more. And maybe you get that spell that says, oh, if your target is holy, you do a boatload of extra damage. But that is also true of yourself. If you get hit with that holy light, and if you're sanctified unholy, you get hit with that holy light, boy, oh boy, you're going to get hit with a whole bunch more damage. So it's a give and take. You're risking to do more, but you're also risking to take more. There is also a bunch of feats that require you to be sanctified. They actually added a bunch of different feats that say, oh, you have to be sanctified to take this feat or this feat or this feat. So it gives you extra options if you do choose to sanctify, or your god forces the issue. So that's basically sanctify. It gives you the holy or unholy trait, and some spells work better against people with those traits. And no more alignment. We can't talk about lawful good, neutral evil, chaotic evil, none of that. This meme is dead. I sent this meme a lot at people. Batman hates people who eat chocolate ice cream, apparently. A few other changes, not as major as Sanctification, because Sanctification was a big change to Clerics, because obviously they had to overhaul all the gods to make this work. But another major change is that divine font ability we talked about before. Now, for those of you who played Clerics before this change, or maybe you're still playing with the original version of 2nd edition, as a Cleric, those free spell slots used to be attached to your charisma modifier. So the better your charisma was, the more of those free slots you got. It was like 1 plus your charisma modifier. So you always got 1. We've had a crappy charisma because you had to, maybe you wanted to be a war priest and you put more points into constitution and strength. Well, you kind of lost out on these. That's all been reworked. It no longer requires charisma at all. At 1st level and up until 4th level, you get 4 free slots as just part of being a cleric. When you hit 5th level, you get an extra 1, so you get 5. And that stays the same all the way up till, I believe, level 15. And at 15, you get 6, and that's where it maxes out. So it's no longer attached to a stat based on how many slots you get. It's just a flat number based on your level. We are also going to talk about a few feats as we talk about different choices that you can make in just a second. But just suffice it to say, there are a bunch of feats were reworked or rebalanced. They actually, if you look at the options that you get for being a war priest, the last option, the final option, which I believe you get at level 19, got an extra thing. It got like one extra thing that it got that it didn't have before. So they make slight changes in the abilities and the feats. Take a look at the feats. If you guys, if you at home are converting your cleric from 2nd edition original to the core, or you have, you've played Clerics before and you know what's going on, and you're just going to pick stuff, take a look. There's a bunch of new feats out. There's a bunch of feats that were retooled and retweaked to make it work better, or just kind of change the words because of how the the alignment thing changed. One of the feats that was the name was changed. The cleric was also known for turning or making the undead flee from them. Basically, it says, "I am the scion of goodness," and they make the undead, the evil undead, flee for their lives. It's actually now called Panic Undead, Turn Undead, licensing issue, word changes, all that crap. But the original second edition version of this was a little restrictive. It made it so you had to have the undead be your level or lower, and that doesn't happen quite that often as you might think. And now it gave you the ability to affect all undead. They have to make a save. And they also have to, and normal undead that aren't normally feared can now be frightened by your ability. So it did make that ability a little bit better, not significantly better, but it made it a little bit better and more useful to take if you want to be the cleric that is specifically against undead. There are now feats that you can take, and they do work a little bit better. We talked a little bit at length about the idea of being sanctified. Now, there's a feat here. There's a new feat here called Divine Rebuttal. Now, although you don't need to be sanctified to take this feat, and what this feat allows you to do is, if your ally is about to roll a saving throw against an effect from a creature, and you're next to that creature, you can attack that creature back with your mace. And if you hit, your ally gets a bonus to that save. Now, if you're sanctified, your attack itself gets your holy or unholy trait. So there's a benefit, even though that some of these feats don't have a direct benefit. You don't need to be sanctified. Some of these feats do give you an extra benefit. So if you're fighting an unholy creature and you hit it with a holy strike, it's going to take a bunch of bonus damage. It's almost guaranteed that thing's going to take bonus damage. We'll see more when the monster book comes out later this year. But I think that's the idea, that some creatures getting hit with holy strikes are definitely going to take more damage or take penalties for getting hit with something that is holy, and vice versa. You getting hit with an unholy strike is probably not good for your health. The benefits of healing, there's a bunch of different feats, ones that make your heals or harms do D10s instead of D8s, because your heal normally uses D8s to roll to see how much you've healed for, or how much your undead is hurt for if you're using the heal to hurt undead. There's a feat that make it D10s, just makes it the die bigger, so your average goes up. Or you have things like the Sacred Ground feat, like I talked about before. You basically sit there in 10 minutes and pray, and everyone around you in a small bubble gets healed. No die roll necessary. So no fear of rolling that one and hurting the person, and everyone gets healed up. It's a little bit of healing. It's not a lot of healing, but it is effectively free, except for the fact that you had to pay for the feat. You had to take the feat, and now you could, for every 10 minutes, while someone else maybe is rolling medicine checks, you're sitting there praying and healing everyone up. And especially if everyone just took a little bit of damage, you're going to be able to top them off pretty quickly. Or if you're that undead minion master, it heals your undead. Now for the little bit of the detriment. The detriment is you do have only D8 hit points. Now, if you're a cloister cleric and you're not really boosting up your armor in some way, even though you have D8 hit points, your health can go away real quick, because you're more likely to be critically hit if you're not careful. So that's something to be concerned about. That's some of the benefits of the War Priest, is the War Priest gets armor proficiency. Even if you don't take the War Priest armor, you only just stick with medium armor. Medium armor is pretty good. You don't have to worry about spending spells to boost up your armor. So you have that benefit. But at the end of the day, the detriment of clerics is in their skills. So beyond getting more skills and languages, you don't get too much benefit of having a high intelligence. Now, if you want to play a high intelligence cleric, go for it. I think we've all played really weird characters, and having a high intelligence cleric may make sense. Maybe if you're a Nethys and you want to learn more about magic and you focus on intelligence. But from a gameplay standpoint, unless you want more skills or more languages without having to spend feats on this, that's really the only benefit you'd get as a high intelligence. Doesn't help your will save because that's on wisdom, which is already going to be pretty high. If you're attacking things, that's if you're with your spells, that's also wisdom. If you're attacking with your melee or ranged weapons, that's either dex or strength. Beyond that, so if you're not focusing on intelligence, your choices of skills is really small. You have 2 plus your intelligence modifier, which is very low. It's the lowest in the game. And you get 1 for your, you get 2, you get a lore and 1 for your background, and you get 1 from your deity. So you're only going to have at most, well, at least 4 skills and a lore. That's if you have a no intelligence bonus. So you're going to get 2 from being a cleric, you get 1 from your god, and you get 1 from your background, and then you get a lore, which the lore is a little bit separate, a little bit more niche. Which means you're not going to either have a lot of extra lore skills, but some of the other classes may have some skill points to spare, and they spend them on maybe a couple extra things, or they spend them on a cool lore or 2 that they get beyond their background. You're not going to have too much flexibility with your skills. You're going to have religion as a major focus, because a lot of things you're going to be rolling on are going to be religion related because you're a cleric, for God's sakes. Haha, insert pun here. And then you might have an idea of what your cleric is all about. And you may also, based on your deity selection, is going to give you a focus on what your extra skill is going to be. So maybe you go, oh, well, if I'm going to be war priest, I want athletics, and maybe my god didn't give me athletics, so I want athletics. I'm getting religion. I got the one that my god gave me, which might be intimidate, which may mean I want to put points into charisma. Well, where am I going to go? Am I going to go with another wisdom skill? Medicine's always a good choice. It's wisdom based, so it's always a good choice. Am I going to let my magic heal instead of that? So maybe I'm going to go intimidate, or I might go diplomacy if I want to have a higher charisma. Maybe I'll go nature. That's also wisdom based. So you have a very small selection of skills. And even if you put a couple of points into your intelligence, maybe at the beginning of your character's creation or throughout your character's career, you're still only getting a few skill points. And like I said, wizards get a lot of intelligence-based benefits by having a lot of benefits by having a high intelligence, because all their spell attacks go up, all their saves go, their DCs for their saves go up, and obviously the skills that they want to focus on are mostly intelligence-based. So that's one of the flaws of a cleric, is they're really single-minded when it comes to their skills, which can drive what they can do in and out of combat beyond their spell casting or beyond swinging with their weapons. So you're really defined by the skills you pick and the spells you pick. And spreading that out too thin could cause you problems. And I'm not saying that you must laser focus on something and that's the only way to play. But keep in mind, there's certain things that clerics want to do. And beyond that, it's hard to spread out a lot. But as a refresher, just remember, clerics are powerhouse divine spellcasters. I mean, you can, like I said, you can think of paladins and champions. I keep saying paladins as champions as the tip of the sword, but you're the voice of your god. And you are the one that has effectively the god's power on tap, especially at higher levels. You can cast some pretty crazy spells. You could be one of the best healers in the game if you want to be, but if you don't want to be that, which a lot of people don't, which is fine, you still get a wide variety of spells you can pick from, and you still get those free healing or harm slots. If you, yet again, so even if you don't want to be the dedicated healing cleric, you still have access to healing if you picked the divine font for healing, or maybe you want to touch someone and decay them and harm them. That's also quite possible for a lot of different gods. Give you the option of both. But that skill discrepancy really you really should have a clear idea of what your character wants to do, especially with their skills, because your skill feats are going to be as important, if not more important for you, because you're going to really have to focus in on 1 or 2 skills that you're really, really good at. And beyond that, like I say, you don't have too many other skills to choose from. But that's just one person's opinion. And if you like having clerics in your game and you like what they did with the new core remastered version and the Sanctified and the removal of alignment, and if you like all of this stuff, or you just can't stand your cleric preaching to you about their god and what they want from them, sound up down in the comments down below. And if you like this video, give us a big old thumbs up. And to be notified of more of our videos, which are going to be coming out with more of our these class videos, give us a big old subscribe. But until then, thanks for watching. And this is Steve from Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. May your die rolls be crits, and may you always roll max damage. See you later.